Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In this video, we're going to expose a person called Abdullah Sameer, who's an ex-Muslim, and he went on to misrepresent a Muslim theologian, a scholar of Islam who has a PhD, in regards to him apparently doubting Islam. And he basically makes the argument that when Muslim scholars come out of Saudi Arabia and they study Islam in Western schools, Western academia, they start doubting Islam because it makes them think outside the box. Now, I reviewed his whole video and I spoke to Abdullah personally, and what I wish to do is show you the exchange of that, how he manipulated and in fact lied about Yasir Qadi when he actually got caught out as well. It's really shameful because I did have lots of respect for this person because of his, he has a good nature, as in he's quite friendly. But things have started getting a bit ugly because I've started to expose the ugly face of his when he starts lying and misrepresenting people's positions, and he's not honest enough to apologize when making mistakes. And those types of people I lose respect really quickly. It's unfortunate it's got to this situation, but that's what happens. So anyway, so basically I watched the video and that's what I want you to do. I want you to watch his video so you understand my position, because you'll never understand it unless you watch it. It's not very long anyway, so you won't get bored, trust me. So this is the counter response to that. So we'll go back to front actually, because speaking about the doubting part is going to take the longest bit, about Yasir Qadi doubting Islam, apparently. But let's go to where apparently the atheist says that Yasir Qadi actually claimed that the Quran that the Quran is changed and it's not preserved. So he basically quotes a narration. I don't know where he's actually picked that narration from, because I haven't seen a video myself, where apparently Yasir Qadi says something along the lines as, he quotes, "The preservation of the Quran cannot then be letter for letter, tashlik for tashlik, narrator the later scholars verbalize, and the Muslims ummah is taught." So basically, I don't really know where he's pulled this one from, but there is a video where, and I'll post the link so you can see it below. And so when you go to the description section, you will see where I'll type Yasir Qadi at the third minute of the video actually says that the Quran that he believes in at this particular moment is unchanged. And that's a recent video. So look at the link below. That is Yasir Qadi's position. He believes that the Quran is unchanged. So that refutes the lie or the misquote that the atheist called Abdullah Sameer presented, that he believes that the Quran is not preserved letter for letter and so forth. The atheist also said that, he suggested that this is part of his doubts, that when he entered Western universities and they taught him possibly about the preservation of the Quran, this actually gave him doubts. But Yasir Qadi never actually outlines in any of his videos or letters that when he joined Western universities, they taught him about the preservation of Quran, and this is what specifically gave him doubts. He doesn't actually go into those details. So I don't know how the atheist actually came up with that assumption. And let's say, for argument's sake, he did have doubts about that. This is, again, and let's say, for example, he said things like that the preservation of the Quran cannot be taught for letter as a preservation, this is clearly a misrepresenting, as well as I highly doubt you could produce any video where he actually said these things. And also, possibly this could be his initial thought or part of his doubts when he wasn't so equipped as a Muslim. Because Yasir Qadi actually says that when he studied at Medina, only the first year of his studies in Islam is when he left, and then he joined Western academia. And he actually says that his mind was pretty much messed up because he wasn't well equipped. So it's possible that he may have made suggestions that the Quran is not preserved according to him not being equipped. But of course, we could understand that he doesn't actually hold such a position or a current position now, because like I said, look at the video in the description section. Yasir Qadi clearly says that the Quran is unchanged today. It's in its preservation, and it is unchanged. Therefore, the atheist has absolutely no argument in claiming that Yasir Qadi's current belief is that he believes that the Quran is not word for word presented and preserved. The second point of contention is that apparently Yasir Qadi in the video, he actually supports the theory of evolution. And the atheist is saying, oh, look, even a scholar, a person with a PhD in Islam, a scholar of Islam, is agreeing to evolution. However, this again is totally misconstrued, because I can post you a video below this video. You can go to the description section. Here Yasir Qadi admits that the theory of evolution, some of it can be accepted while other parts negated, and that the theory of evolution does, listen to this, does not go against the Quran. So here clearly we can see that Yasir Qadi is possibly coming up with a new interpretation of the theory of evolution, which doesn't go against the Quranic's interpretation. And there are Muslims who do come up with a different type of interpretation of the theory of evolution to suit the Quran. I've actually heard this from other Muslim theologians as well, where, for example, some people say that, yes, God did create Adam and Eve, but he also created human-like creatures on the earth. And that those ape-like creatures were a complete separate creation from the creation of Adam, where us human beings obviously originated from. But then those ape-like creatures were just a separate creation on their own, which evolved by themselves through their own species. And so it is possible that Yasir Qadi is possibly speaking about that type of interpretation of evolution. So when atheists look at the descent of man and say, oh, look, those bones resemble, some apes and all those sorts of creatures, well, God could have created an ape-like creature that resembled like a human being, and that's why, we have this, this confusion of, where did man originate from? Did he come from Adam, or did he come from those ape-like creatures? I mean, Yasir Qadi clearly says there are certain things he can accept in evolution and certain things he can't accept in evolution. So we don't really know deep down what those real interpretations are according to Yasir Qadi. I mean, he doesn't even specify them into in-depth detail. So I don't know why Abdullah Sameer will conflate it all together into one box and say, oh, look, Yasir Qadhi believes in evolution, when he actually dismisses evolution on certain issues and he agrees on it on certain circumstances. So why was Abdullah Sameer dishonest by leaving out the true context of his position? And look at the video below and you can see it for yourself. I'll post it. And so this is the funny thing, folks. You know, the Muslims got really happy when Christian professor Dr. Bart Ehrman, he left Christianity, and this guy had some high academia, right, in Christianity. One of the biggest theologians, prominent scholars. He's got true academia from one of the biggest universities in America, and he's become an agnostic. He's left Christianity, and Muslims really like this guy, and they're like, oh, look, see, Christianity is false, we can prove it. You know, we have a scholar that has left Christianity, and, you know, he discredits the Bible and so forth. But now the atheists want to have their shot, right? And so they're trying to get Yasir Qadhi, a Muslim theologian, a person who is a professor in Islam. They want to see a person like his caliber to leave Islam or have doubts about Islam that really, really damages the reputation of Islam. Because let's be frank, really, there is not a prominent Muslim scholar who's actually, you know, at the caliber of, say, Bart Ehrman, who has actually left Islam after studying at, you know, prestigious universities like in Medina and Mecca for Islam, that has left Islam with high academia, high credentials, and who has discredited Islam. We don't have that, right? And so, you know, these ex-Muslims like to say, the more you study Islam, the more you investigate, the more you realize, the more learned you become, you know, the more you leave Islam. But we don't see that in the Muslim academic world. So I can understand where they're coming from, where they're really being desperate and trying to go after Yasir Qadhi to misquote him. And so let's get to the final point about Yasir Qadhi's doubts. Now, apparently, according to Abdullah Sameer, Yasir Qadhi doubts his Islam and his faith. But let's see what he actually doubts, the level of his doubts, and we'll actually see how Abdullah Sameer actually lies in one of his testimonies, presenting a testimony to clarify that Yasir Qadhi actually doubted his faith. Even his faith, he doubted his faith to an extreme level. As you can see, Abdullah Sameer types, he said in his own words, he had a crisis of knowledge, came close to a crisis of faith. Guys, all I'm going to do, don't listen to me, listen to what Yasir Qadhi himself says. Watch the video. I'll post the video here as the third description link, because I'm not going to post it here, it's going to be too long. Watch it for yourself. I think it's about 8 minutes long, I'm not too sure. Watch it for yourself and you will see that he clearly clarifies what these doubts were. I'll just paraphrase it. Here Yasir Qadhi explains his doubts, and what made him doubt is that the ulama who attended these Western universities to study Islam don't have the right tools before entering. So Yasir Qadhi actually speaks. Remember, Abdullah Sameer said in his video that a lot of the academics, when they come from Muslim universities and they enter Western universities to study Islam, Abdullah Sameer said they leave Islam. They basically leave in the first, second year, whatever, they leave Islam, right? But Abdullah Sameer doesn't even tell his viewers in his video why that is. Why that is. And Yasir Qadi actually explains why that is in the video. He says, quote, and he clearly says, because they weren't equipped, meaning they didn't have the right tools to engage against Western academia. See, why didn't Abdullah Sameer actually present that in his video? Why did he conveniently leave that part out? And when I presented this to Abdullah Sameer and I said, why did you leave this out? He completely ignores it and he says, quote, because his point was that academia is dangerous for Muslims. He says that academia is dangerous for Muslims. And that's why these, young academics in Muslims are leaving Islam in their first year of academia when they're studying in Western universities. But it's not because Western academia is dangerous. Not at all. Yasir Qadi actually explains clearly that it is because the Muslim academic himself is not betterly equipped in knowledge, therefore he finds controversy in his academia in Western schools, and that's why he starts doubting his faith and then becoming either an atheist or an agnostic. So why did Abdullah Sameer leave that important detail out of his video? Well, the truth of the matter is, folks, he's being dishonest and a liar. So now we've dealt with that issue. Let's come to Yasir Qadi's personal issue and why he himself doubted. Now, if you watch the same video, Yasir Qadi says clearly in that video that when he studied, because he only studied his first year in Medina, and that's when he actually left to go to a Western academic school. And upon arrival to those Western academic schools, Yasir Qadi says that when he was receiving these questions, his mind was boggled up. It was clouded, it was mixed up. Because, and of course he gives the reason to this, because he mentioned why some academics become, apostates or, agnostics and atheists and so forth. It is because they're not betterly equipped. So Yasir Qadi is obviously suggesting that to himself, because he mentions that when he entered the academia world in the Western world, obviously he was describing himself too, because his mind was boggled, again, because he didn't have the means, the equipment, the tools, the knowledge he's talking about to actually engage back to some of the Western criticism leveled at Islam and the Quran. So in other words, if he was better trained, it would have removed a lot of his doubts. His mind was scrambled up since he was a beginner. But then in the same video, he teaches how he learned to overcome those doubts by putting his trust in Allah, and that there are some questions that don't need to be answered. In other words, they're not as important that it would make him doubt Islam altogether, or very importantly. So it's obviously not as important for him to doubt Islam completely. And in fact, he even gives a resolution how to overcome that, and he says to put your trust in Allah. So basically he's saying that if, science says something that contradicts the Quran, science is ever changing. One day it may say something, the next day it may change its testimony. So because science changes its testimony, Yasir Qadi sticks to the notion of putting his trust in Allah and waiting for science to reapprove itself. That's possibly his position. So again, he's not doubting the Quran, he's not doubting Islam, and he's conceding that there are some questions that are not answered. And he actually says that there will be some questions that no one will know the answers to. And it is actually part of Islam to concede to that. And, sometimes we need to put our trust in Allah, and sometimes Allah knows things better than all of us. And it doesn't mean that we're all going to grasp every single answer. And he actually describes that in his videos. He speaks about, for example, prayer. He says, why do we have to pray 5 times a day and not 2 times a day? Well, we'll never know the answer to that, would we? That's a wisdom that Allah knows about. So Yasir Qadi describes issues that we'll never have answers to, and that's why we need to put our trust in Allah. And again, in nowhere does he say that he doubts it to the extent that he's actually questioning whether Islam is true or false. No, he completely does not have that conclusion, as the atheist likes to put it. Now, this is where Abdullah actually makes a lie. Remember I said at the beginning of the video, he's going to make a lie. Here you can see in the comments, he says, and I'll post the video, he presents a video from Dawah Man, and it's pretty unbiased to go to a video by Dawah Man, because Dawah Man is actually against Yasir Qadi. He's totally biased, in a biased position. So he presents a video from someone who actually, dislikes Yasir Qadi, and that's not a right method to do. If you want to bring up evidence, you need to go to Yasir Qadi himself. So he presents a video from Dawah Man, and I'll put a link below this video, where apparently he himself said, Dawah Man apparently quotes that Yasir Qadi had lost his faith much more strongly. As you can see in the comment section here, you can see it all in the screen. It says that Yasir Qadi has lost his faith much more strongly, much more stronger than I did. You can see for yourself. So, and that's the video he posts, and I'll put it below this link as a 4th link, and you can see it for yourself. And I said to Abdullah Sameer, I said, are you presenting Dawah Man? I said, first of all, he's biased, so obviously he's going to not present what Yasir Qadi said. And I said to Abdullah Sameer, I said, where did Yasir Qadi himself, he said he lost his faith much more strongly. And Abdullah Sameer writes back and he says he has doubts. And I said, having doubts and losing your faith much more strongly is very different. And Abdullah Sameer says, I didn't say he lost his faith. Look at this. He says he didn't say he lost his faith. But earlier he did say he lost his faith, quoting Dawah Man. As you can see here, this is what he said. It says that Yasir Qadi has lost his faith much more strongly. And when I asked Abdullah Sameer that why he lied, because he was quoting Dawah Man to present that Yasir Qadi actually did say himself that he lost his faith, Abdullah Sameer says he's not saying it, it's Dawah Man that's saying it. And I said to him, shame on you, you were clearly using Dawah Man's material in order to prove Yasir Qadi claimed to lose his faith, when Yasir Qadi never ever said that he lost his faith, ever. So in conclusion, folks, yes, Yasir Qadi did say he has doubts, but he explained that those doubts in his mind left unanswered questions. However, he also agrees that shaitan will always put doubts in your mind, and he teaches that to resolve those doubts, you need to put your trust in God and accept that there are some questions that will never be answered. He also said that the parts of Islam and Allah's decree, he said it's part of Allah's, part of the decree of Allah for that to happen. He also affirms he still believes in Allah and the Quran, that it is unchanged. He never said that he has doubts that the Quran is not preserved, and we've actually shown a video to that. And we actually showed that to help erase the doubts, Yasir Qadi clearly suggested that Muslims need to be better equipped before they enter Western academia within Islamic knowledge. So this notion of Abdullah Sameer claiming, oh, as soon as a Muslim comes out of Saudi Arabia, whatever, he's a scholar and he enters Western academia, bang, he gets hit by all these questions, bang, he loses his faith. Because why? Because Islam is false. No, that's not the notion. Yasir Qadi is teaching that the reason this happens is because Muslims aren't better equipped on how to address those questions that are specific questions that affect one's theology. Well, the essential parts of his theology that could lead him out of Islam. Like, for example, questioning whether God exists or not. And we know Yasir Qadhi never had that sort of doubt. He never ever had the doubt to say, oh, my doubts include that God does not exist. Or my doubts include that the Quran is not the preserved word of God, word for word. I mean, he clearly says that the Quran is unchanged. And if he did ever make a suggestion that the Quran is unpreserved, it could have been in the first year of his degree when he again said in the video that his mind was muddled up and he couldn't think clearly because he didn't have the tools. He made that clear suggestion. And what is his current position now? His current position is that he believes that the Quran is unchanged. And then Abdullah Sameer goes to Dawah Man to even bring more lies that apparently Yasir Qadhi said he had, or Yasir Qadhi came to the point of close to crisis of his faith, meaning losing his faith altogether. And I asked Abdullah Sameer to produce this from Yasir Qadhi himself, and then he says, oh, I didn't say it, was Dawah Man that said it. Well, hello, why did you then present it as evidence? Because obviously you believed in Dawah Man. And of course, he didn't even apologize. And in fact, I even challenged him. I said, now that I've presented the true context and the true information, will you take down your video? And you know what Abdullah Sameer says? Abdullah Sameer says, oh, I want a written clarification from Yasir Qadhi. Well, as if, he wants a written clarification. I mean, he's not happy with my video response. He's not happy with the videos that I present where it clarifies Yasir Qadhi's position. He wants it all from writing now. He wants it from Yasir Qadhi himself. From himself. As if Abdullah Sameer presented everything in writing. He presented video format. He presented snippets and clips. He didn't even present the whole context of the video. But of course, now that he's been exposed, I said to him, I'll give you 24 hours to take down the video or recorrect it, or I'll put a video response up. And he said he won't. He won't take it down unless he gets a written response from Yasir Qadhi himself. And so the guy is in denial. He's been refuted for misrepresenting and lying about Yasir Qadhi's position in claiming that he doesn't believe that the Quran is preserved authentically, or that he has doubts in Islam that actually affect his faith strongly. That is totally wrong, where it brings his mind into crisis and losing his faith, quoting Dawah Man, and that is totally rubbish. And then when Abdullah Sameer gets completely exposed, he's like, oh, look at Dr. Zakir Naik's friend. He also doubted Islam or something like that, and so forth. Well, who cares about Dr. Zakir Naik's friend who doubted Islam? Who cares? We're talking about theologians. We're talking about true academics. We're talking about true scholars. Okay? So don't give me, now there's Dr. Zakir Naik's friend. Seriously, this guy's just straw man. So as we've explained, if Yasir Qadhi has some doubts, meaning that he's got some questions about Islam that are unanswered, he actually says in this video here, Yasir Qadhi explains his doubts. He actually says that when you leave Islamic university, go to a Western university, he says that the Western university deconstructs the building, and then you got to put all those blocks back together again. So Yasir Qadhi is working his way through on how to build those Lego blocks back up and answer all the questions. But again, he never says that these questions take him to the level of making him doubt his faith or lose Islam. All he's doing is understanding that he's a human being, he has limited knowledge, and that not every knowledge or question has got an answer right away. And he's working through the process of answering some of the questions that may impact his faith. But he doesn't even clarify and say that those questions are impacting his faith to the level of losing his faith. So they could just be like, any type of random question that isn't really important. And he actually says that when those doubts came, he actually drew a line. And remember what I explained in the beginning of my video, where I said that, if science says something and then Islam says something, it brings doubts into your mind, and you're like, okay, well, I need to pick Islam because that's a rational perspective, because science could change, and we've seen it change. So Yasir Qadhi deals with that doubt by drawing a line in between and holding onto Islam. So he actually gives a resolution on how to dismiss those doubts and accept that in Islam we can accept that some things are going to be unanswered, and that is a legitimate doubt to have, because he actually explains that doubts actually also come from shaitan. So shaitan will always penetrate doubts into your mind. So we need to accept that. That's what he's basically saying. But he clearly teaches to overcome that. And as he claims that as soon as you keep building the blocks and constantly investigating, researching, and having the right tools, then you can obviously overcome it and not become an agnostic and an atheist.
But for me, this is a theological line, that I know the Quran is the wahi that Allah sent to our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And I decided that I'm not going to compromise on this belief. So because of this, overall, I'm still not going to allow, for example, sodomy. Whereas the progressives will allow it because they're historicizing the Quran. You understand this point here, right?
So here he clearly shows that science may say that homosexuality, for example, is okay. There are good reasons for it. You may have natural tendencies for homosexuality. But, that may put questions and doubts in his mind. Why did Allah say that it is haram to do the act of homosexuality? But Yasir Qadhi, he can put a fine line, draw a line in his doubts and say he will accept the wahi of the Quran over what science or what the progressives or the modernists or the Westerners say. So here Yasir Qadhi is teaching how to overcome the doubts.
Solid intellectual response to the simple question, why would God do that? There is no answer. It's the same issue. Why would God cause tsunamis? Why would God? There are things that لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. In the end of the day, لا يسأل عما يفعل. We don't have the right to question God. So that will lead some people to question His existence. Because if they don't understand the God they're going to believe in, they end up rejecting the God. Whereas for me, I think it is far more logical to believe in a God and I don't understand certain things than to reject a God and then I have a whole million other questions that are unanswered. So there is no answer for his question other than to say it only works for a certain amount of time and also for a certain group of people.
So as you can see, Yasir Qadhi clearly says that there are certain questions that you need to draw a line if you're having those doubts, and you need to just put your trust in Allah, and Allah knows the wisdom and the answers to those questions, and we need to accept the humility by not getting everything answered. Like for example, in the Quran, Allah mentions Alif Lam Mim. Only Allah knows the meaning of these specific letters. that there, right there, proves that there are certain things we'll never have an answer to. So Satan constantly puts doubts in our minds. We need to put our trust in Allah and leave our trust and our testimony and our belief within the religion of Islam and the truthfulness of the Quran. And if we did do that, then science can keep arguing amongst each other. It may sometimes confirm what the Quran says. It may sometimes reject what the Quran says. But we put our trust in God, not in science. Science is ever changing. And that's exactly what Yasir Qadi was teaching.